How much of your childhood do you truly remember? It all began last autumn, in the hushed quiet of my mother's attic. The air was thick and still, carrying the scent of slow time, of dust and brittle memories. A single bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows across forgotten furniture as I searched. I found it tucked beneath the eaves, a simple cardboard box, the word keepsakes scrawled across the top. Inside, a jumble of my past self lay waiting, crayon drawings of lopsided houses, a plaster handprint, and my first-grade report card from Miss Davis, noting my proficiency with safety scissors. It was a time capsule of an innocent life, a life I could barely recognize as my own. And beneath a faded construction paper turkey, I found the packet of letters. They were from a school penpal project, a relic from the year 1994. Remember those? Miss Davis, a kind woman with perpetually chalk-dusted fingers, had called it Friends Across Town. It was a way for us 6-year-olds at Northwood Elementary to connect with kids from another school, a place called Briarwood. We were each assigned a name, a blank slate onto which we projected our childish ideas of friendship. Mine was a boy named Josh. I remembered the name, a faint echo in a distant hallway of my mind, but the face was a complete blur, a ghost from a past I thought I knew. The project was meant to teach us communication, to broaden our tiny worlds. A forgotten friend. It felt so harmless. But what happens when those innocent memories hide something you were never meant to find? The packet was tied with a brittle, faded red ribbon. I untied it carefully, unfolding the first letter. It was written on that wide-ruled paper, the kind with the dotted midline to help us practice our letters. His handwriting was a wobbly, oversized print in blue crayon. He wrote about his dog, Patches, and how his favorite color was blue. He asked if I liked kickball and drew a stick figure kicking a red ball in the margin. It was exactly what you'd expect. Completely, utterly normal. In an age of instant messages that vanish into the digital ether, a handwritten letter feels like an artifact, a tangible piece of a person you can hold in your hands. These letters were a physical link to a boy I'd long since forgotten. But as I continued through the stack, I realized Josh's letters were different, and that our simple project held a secret far darker than any 6-year-old could imagine. But the letters weren't the only thing inside that dusty box. Tucked beneath the last fragile envelope was a small stack of Polaroids, bound by a rubber band so old it had turned hard and gray. I sat in the attic's low light, the photos feeling cool against my palm. The band snapped, its dry crack echoing in the silence. The first picture was a simple shot of a 2-story house with a large oak tree out front. My house. It was taken from across the street, partially obscured by leaves. On the back, in my pen pal Josh's spidery script, was a date from 30 years ago. A knot of unease began to tighten in my gut. I told myself I must have sent him the picture. I had to have. It was a simple, logical explanation that my mind desperately wanted to believe. The second photo made that excuse feel pathetic. It was closer, much closer. The shot was angled up from the garden, aimed directly at my bedroom window, at night. My curtains were drawn, but a sliver of lamplight escaped, a tiny beacon proving I was home. Just a picture. But how could he have possibly known which room was mine? I never told him that. The feeling was no longer unease. It was a cold, creeping dread that settled deep in my bones. He had been there. He had been watching. I almost didn't look at the last one. My hand was shaking. I turned it over. This one? This one was taken from inside my room. The perspective was from the dark corner near my closet, looking across my empty bed toward the window. My posters, my desk, my entire private world, captured in the flat, sterile glare of a camera flash. My sanctuary had been violated by an unseen guest. That feeling of intrusion is more relevant now than ever, in an age where the line between being seen and being surveilled has all but vanished. But the date on the back of that final, impossible photo was the true horror. A date whose terrible meaning I wouldn't understand until I read the very last letter. Do you remember those childhood coincidences that felt like pure, unadulterated magic? The letters from Josh unlocked another memory from that same strange school year, one I'd almost completely buried. It was our third grade class project, the Great Balloon Launch. I remember standing on the cracked black top of the playground, the spring air crisp and smelling of freshly cut grass. My teacher, Mrs. Gable, handed each of us a bright helium balloon with a postcard tied to its string, our names and the school's address written in our own clumsy cursive. A perfect story. We all let go at once, a kaleidoscope of red, blue, and yellow dots shrinking against the vast, empty sky. A silent, hopeful prayer sent to the heavens. My little red balloon was the last one I could see. Weeks went by. Most of the balloons were never heard from again. A few postcards came back from neighboring towns, maybe 20 or 30 miles away at most. Then, one morning, Mrs. Gable called me to her desk, her face lit with a kind of bewildered excitement. My postcard had been found. It was found by Josh, my pen pal, who supposedly lived over 200 miles away in a completely different state. The class erupted in cheers. It was a miracle, a 1 in a million shot. The universe itself had connected us. But sitting there in my mother's attic, the musty air thick with forgotten decades and those awful Polaroids on the floor, the magic felt tainted. It felt manufactured, like a carefully constructed lie.
How could a simple latex balloon, subject to the chaotic and utterly unpredictable wind currents of the upper atmosphere, travel a specific 200 miles northeast to land in one particular suburban backyard? The odds aren't just astronomically long, they are fundamentally impossible. It defies physics. It defies all known logic. It was never a coincidence. This realization chilled me more than any ghost story. The idea that my life had been subtly curated by an unseen hand. It means that someone was close. Someone was always close, pulling the strings just out of sight. They didn't just find the balloon by sheer chance. They were waiting for it. Or, and this thought makes my blood run cold, Josh was never 200 miles away at all. Have you ever seen true fear in your mother's eyes? I thought I hadn't, until that moment in the attic. The memory surfaced, suddenly so clear. I was 7 years old, sitting on the floor as a handyman installed a heavy brass deadbolt on our front door. The air smelled of sawdust and metal. The drills whined the only sound besides my mother's clipped one-word answers. She stood with her arms crossed, her jaw tight, watching his every move. I just thought we were getting a new lock. Now, holding these letters, I realize she was fortifying our home. She was building a wall against something I couldn't possibly see. Her entire demeanor changed that year. The easy laughter was gone, replaced by a constant low hum of anxiety. She'd watch me play in the yard from the kitchen window, her hand resting near the phone. That balloon incident, which I saw as pure magic, must have been a terrifying signal to her, a silent panic. She never spoke of it, but her fear seeped into the very foundation of our lives, an invisible poison. It's a chilling reminder of how parents carry the weight of unseen threats, shielding their children in ways they can't possibly comprehend. Then, one afternoon, she sat me down. Her voice was flat, final.
The pen pal program is over. No more letters, no more pictures. I cried, not understanding why my friend was being taken away. It wasn't a punishment. It was a desperate act of protection. But her frantic efforts only raised a much darker question. What exactly did she discover about Josh that made her so utterly afraid? Have you ever shared a name with someone so close they felt like a brother? My childhood best friend was also named Josh. We were inseparable. The two Joshes, everyone called us. Our imaginations built a shared world no one else could enter. I remember us in the woods behind my house, building a rickety fort from fallen branches and a stolen blue tarp. He'd be hammering a nail crookedly, his tongue stuck out in concentration, while I secured the roof with fraying twine. He was the other boy in those unsettling Polaroids, the one with the goofy, toothless grin and permanently scraped knees. We were a team. Then, halfway through that same strange school year,
The year of the red balloon? The year my mother installed that heavy brass deadbolt. He was just gone. One day he was at school, complaining about homework, and the next, his desk was starkly empty. His parents moved away a month later, quiet and hollowed out. No one ever truly said what happened. How does a 7-year-old boy simply vanish from a small town without a single witness? And now, holding these letters, a cold dread washed over me, far worse than anything I felt in the attic's dusty air. The handwriting, the memories, the secrets, they were all written by a Josh. But they couldn't have been written by my Josh. He was gone. This realization reframed everything. My mother's silent panic wasn't simple worry, it was something primal and terrifying. That deadbolt wasn't for strangers, it was for someone specific. I now had to read every single letter again, not as a nostalgic message from a lost friend, but as a chilling communication from an imposter who knew us both intimately. There's a reason we stopped playing in the woods. Thinking of my Josh, my best friend, unlocked it. The memory rushed back, cold and sharp. It was late summer, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. We were building our fort near the creek when Josh suddenly froze. He just pointed. I followed his gaze, past the sycamores, to a figure standing perfectly still between two pale birch trees. He was a man, but not like any I'd ever seen. He was impossibly tall and gaunt, a scarecrow in a threadbare black suit. His limbs were like sticks, his face a pale, featureless blur in the deep shadows. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, watching us with a stillness that felt ancient and deeply wrong. The forest, alive with birdsong just a moment before, fell completely silent. All we could hear was the frantic pounding of our own hearts. A silent, primal understanding passed between us. We dropped everything and we ran. We didn't look back. We just ran, stumbling over roots and tearing through bushes, our ragged breaths filling the dead air. We didn't stop until we burst from the trees and collapsed on my lawn, gasping, our chests burning. That day, the woods ceased to be our kingdom. It became a guarded place that contained a monster. We never spoke of him again, a shared trauma buried under years of willful forgetfulness. But now, holding these letters, I realized he wasn't just some random, terrifying stranger. It wasn't until I reread the third letter that I saw the connection, a single chilling phrase I'd ignored for decades. We had a game, my Josh and I. We called it boxes. The rules were simple. We'd each take an old metal lunchbox and fill it with our most important treasure. Then we'd hike to our spot deep in the woods and bury them side by side, a way of entrusting a piece of ourselves to the earth and to each other. We stopped playing right after we saw the gaunt man. The thought of that box became an obsession. I had to go back. I drove the 3 hours to my old house. The new owners eyed me with a mixture of pity and suspicion as I explained my request. Shovel in hand, I stood under that same oak tree. The blade bit into the soft, damp earth, sending up the familiar scent of soil and decay. A dull thud echoed through the handle. I'd found it. Rust had fused the metal clasps shut, a seal against the years. I sat there on the ground, the cold metal box in my lap, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was more than just a box of forgotten toys. It was a final message I'd failed to receive. With a screwdriver from my car, I pried the lid open, a groan of tortured metal. Inside, nestled in dirt, was my prized possession, a small plastic astronaut with a broken helmet. But beneath it was something else, something that wasn't mine. It was Josh's silver compass, the one his grandfather gave him. He treasured that thing. He never ever went anywhere without it, its needle always quivering, always pointing north, always pointing home. That compass being in my box wasn't a coincidence. It was a clue. Josh didn't just run away. He was here. He came back to our spot. And as I held it, I realized with a sickening certainty that my Josh hadn't been the one to put it there. What poison can a single final letter hold? My mother had hidden it for 30 years, but I found it tucked inside an old cookbook. The paper was brittle, the blue ink faded to a ghostly gray. I sat at my kitchen table and forced myself to read the words I was never meant to see. The childish scrawl was all there, but now, with adult eyes, I saw the real, venomous message hidden beneath. Every question about my Josh was far too specific. Does your friend still like to dig for treasure by the big oak? Does he still have that bright red jacket? It was a checklist, an inventory. The letter described the woods behind my house with a chilling accuracy no pen pal from another state could ever possess.
He was watching us from the trees. He was the gaunt man. I was never the target. I was just the bridge, the way in. The final line chilled me more than any faded Polaroid. Tell your friend I'm coming to see his box soon. I want the best treasure for my collection. It wasn't a friendly promise. It was a claim of ownership. My mother's sudden fear, the new deadbolt, the abrupt end of our games, it all clicked into a horrifying mosaic. But the letter ended with one final postscript, a question about the one secret I thought my Josh had only ever told me. How can a single memory become a murder weapon? The truth was a cold tide that drowned 30 years of ignorance. The Josh who wrote to me was never a child. He was the gaunt man. His hollow eyes stared back from the faded ink. Every secret I shared about our games, our hiding spots, the Polaroids I sent, I was feeding them directly to his predator. The balloon wasn't a coincidence, it was a signal. My mother's deadbolt wasn't paranoia, it was a desperate, failed attempt to lock the door after she realized I had already invited the monster inside. I was his perfect tool. I spent that summer sharpening the blade that took my best friend from this world. I remember drawing the map with a sickening clarity, my red crayon pressed hard, outlining the path past the crooked oak to the flat rock where we buried our boxes. I described our treasures, a catalog for a thief. I even told him when Josh would be there, alone. I thought I was sharing a secret with a new friend. I was writing a death sentence. That knowledge is a poison that has circulated in my veins for decades, and only now do I feel its final paralyzing effect. Tonight, snow falls outside my own home. I stand by the window, watching the flakes muffle the world in white. The silence is absolute. Why does it feel like 30 years is no time at all?
The world changes. Technology creates new threats. But the old fears, the ones that walk and learn your name from an innocent child, they never really go away. They just wait. The storm has passed. A perfect, untouched canvas of white stretches across my backyard. But it's not untouched. My breath catches, fogging the cold glass. There's a single set of footprints. They lead from the dark edge of the woods, across the yard, and end directly at my back door. No tracks lead away. He has been waiting.